Hello and welcome back to Pharmacist Diaries, the podcast that reveals the secret lives of pharmacists, from where their journeys began, where they are now, and everything in between. I am your host, Anisha Patel, and today I am super excited to invite Clement Haeck onto the podcast. Clement is one of the FIP Early Career Pharmaceutical Group members. He is the chairperson of Liaison. He has a role to help gain involvement from all the special interest groups within the Early Careers Pharmaceutical groups. He works alongside Amanda and Safiye, who were in previous episodes of the podcast, so episodes 101 and 102. So if you haven't heard those, go back and listen to them. All of these three pharmacists work together for FIP, so it's a really interesting mix of professionals and different skill sets and what they do for the organisation. However, the interesting part about this week's episode is that Clement is from France. He studied pharmacy in his home country, but he had the opportunity to spend some time in the UK during his pharmacy degree because there was a really cool exchange program. So from the beginning of his journey, we identify that he absolutely loves travel. He really enjoys the global aspect of pharmacy, and that passion continues throughout his career. So he starts off his pharmacy career in the industry. He's very fascinated by research and the scientific side of pharmacy, and has worked for multiple organizations in this space, and is currently living in New York City. We also hear a lot about his passion for travel, and he spends 6 months traveling around the world, not only to learn about different cultures and see different countries and explore the globe, but he meets pharmacists everywhere that he goes and explores conferences and explores the profession from a different perspective, which is super commendable and clearly demonstrates his dedication to the profession. I love this episode because we hear so much about Clement's motivation to mentor other pharmacy students and pharmacists, especially those who are going into PhDs and going down the industry route, because he loves to provide them with support, or I guess insider view of what it's like to go down this pathway, and helping them to prevent the mistakes that they might make, or give them advice along their journey from, I guess, his experience, and how he can improve their journey within their PhD. So yeah, it's a great episode. Can't wait for you guys to listen to it, and tune in. Tell me why you wanted to become a pharmacist in the first place.
So initially, when I was in high school, I loved chemistry, so I wanted to study chemistry initially, but I knew I didn't want to go only studying chemistry, and not sure if I would end up as a chemist, as a researcher, or if I couldn't go through this path, most of the time you would end up as a chemistry teacher. So I wanted to make sure I have more options. So I like the health aspect, so I considered studying medicine and pharmacy. And because there were more chemistry in pharmacy, I chose pharmacy.
Amazing. And what was university like for you? Did you continue your journey with enjoying, I guess, the chemistry kind of modules that you were involved in the first couple of years? And I assume you loved pharmaceutics as well, and kind of any of the sort of sciencey and, industry related kind of subjects that you go through as a student.
Yes, so during my PharmD school in France, I tried to specialize more in industry and research. So I did some internship and like extracurricular activities linked to chemistry or medicinal chemistry, organic chemistry research. I did an internship placement during my second and third year in a medicinal chemistry lab. And then I realized, actually, I don't like the lab aspect of medicinal chemistry. So I tried to shift my focus to different fields. So I was more interested in pharmaceutics, drug delivery. That's why I did my master in drug delivery and pharmaceutics.
And what is it about, I guess, drug development and pharmaceutics that you're quite passionate about? What was it at university that really kind of gave you that drive to consider a career pathway down this route?
So first, I had very good, enthusiastic and entertaining professor. Professor Jürgen Zippmann is German initially and is quite known in the pharmaceutic drug delivery field. And he has always very entertaining and interesting lectures. And so that's why I was very interested in this topic. And I like the formulation drug delivery aspect because we are able to, using drug powder and different excipients, powder of different excipients, we can formulate a drug and then bring it to the market, or at least in clinical trials, and hopefully bring it to the market.
Yeah, amazing. I mean, yeah, I really enjoyed that aspect of pharmacy as well as a student, but I loved the whole patient education, counseling, and being in front of patients day in, day out. Like I knew like that's where I belonged as a student. But there are elements of research that we can now incorporate, obviously, into our hospital roles or community roles, or now I'm in academia. So I guess it's nice that I have a little bit of both, which is enjoyable. And once you finished pharmacy in France, I've recorded a podcast episode with a friend of mine who is also a French pharmacist. So we have talked a little bit about what it's like to work as a pharmacist in France. Did you start working, or did you go straight to the UK to pursue your PhD?
So I was lucky. So during my PharmD in France, I was lucky to do a 1-year exchange program in the UK. So I got to experience the whole MPharm year in the UK. So I did the third year MPharm in the UK. It was part of the European Union Erasmus exchange program. Nowadays, it's more difficult, I think, to find. But I was very lucky that my university had an agreement with the University of Kent, so I could spend the whole year in the UK to study pharmacy. And I really enjoyed my time there and understanding the UK MPharm degree. So I still consider even going into hospital pharmacy by the end of my degree. But in France, when you want to go to hospital pharmacy, you have to take another competitive examination at the end of the 5th year. And it's a national competitive examination. And it's very selective, very competitive. And because I already went through the first year competitive examination, at the end of the first year in France, you need to go through this competitive examination to go into the second year. And because I already went through this, I didn't want to go through another competitive examination. And I wanted to work abroad. So I decided more to go into industry and research, and then so specialize more in research and industry. So I did a master in drug delivery and formulation in Paris, in a different university in Paris, for my 6th and final year of the PharmD. And then I didn't end up working in a hospital or community. I only did a mandatory placement throughout my PharmD. And then I went straight look for a PhD program in abroad. I wanted to go abroad just to explore new horizons, new countries. And I know that especially if I wanted to work abroad after, it would add more value to my profile to have like a PhD from a different country. So I look for PhDs abroad, and so I applied to many PhDs, and I got the opportunity to directly do a PhD in Belfast right after my PharmD.
That's amazing. Do you know what? I didn't know that the French universities had such brilliant programs where you could work in other countries or spend an entire year abroad. Like, that is such an incredible opportunity that you had. And what an amazing experience, like in your sort of maybe early 20s, you must have been 20 or 21, to come and live in the UK, in Kent, for a year and immerse yourself in the English environment. I mean, that's cool. I love that.
Yes.
Oh, that's great. Did you find there was a big difference between the undergraduate program in France and in the UK? Because I feel like from the conversations I've had with my friend Layli, so she came to work with us at the Evelina, where I work, the Children's Hospital. She came on an internship. So I interviewed her for the podcast, and I learned so much about how challenging and competitive it is to work in hospital pharmacy. And she's also kind of like asked me a lot about like residency programs and like what opportunities there are and if that's mandatory, which it isn't in the UK. So we've had some really interesting discussions about the differences between the UK and France. It would be lovely to hear your perspective on what university is like in both countries.
Yes. So at the moment, the residency program to specialize in hospital pharmacy in France, usually it's a 4-year residency program after this national competitive examination. So you're ranked and then you can choose your location and specialty. So it's either hospital pharmacy, biomedical laboratory, and now they had a industry research path, but to do a combined PharmD PhD. But this is based a few places on this, and now they're currently reforming this whole program, and they want to incorporate community pharmacy as one of the options to have a better, I don't know, more. So everyone will have to go through the program, kind of, I think, a national exam. But there is still under discussions to see how they will do this. And so I noticed the difference between the UK and France is I noticed in the UK, it's way more clinical and you start way earlier the clinical aspect. So you have the OSCEs where you do a patient interaction from the second or third year or even earlier nowadays. In France, you only start this in your 4th or 5th year. So it's, I think, very late. Nowadays, I think they're reforming these days the French pharmacy curriculum. So I think nowadays they're trying to incorporate earlier also. But France is way more theoretical, like hardcore science until 4th year, and you only incorporate a bit clinical and community pharmacy from the 3rd year, I think.
I think it's quite hard to get a balance though, because there is so much to learn in a pharmacy degree. You've got all the science, you've got the communication skills, the consultation skills, all the clinical content. I mean, there's an incredible amount of clinical content to learn. But I think because we're quite fortunate in the UK as to how advanced the profession is and how much opportunity there is to work in pharmacy and the variety, the skill set, like now we can be prescribers and we can run our own clinics in our GP practices or in hospital clinics. I mean, there's not many countries who have, branched out to have pharmacists work in this capacity. So I'm definitely very fortunate to be living here and working here. I've done my prescribing course. I work in pediatrics and in palliative care. So it's really exciting that I now have the opportunity to potentially prescribe for my patients. Like, that's really exciting. But it's also, I mean, it's great that we learn from each other. So in the role I have, we have international pharmacists coming over for internships, and they learn so much about what we're doing in the UK. We also learn about what they're doing in their home countries. But a lot of the kind of process of them coming over is to then implement some change in their home hospital or their home community pharmacy or wherever they work. So it's really interesting to, I guess, see that perspective. So I guess when you finished your degree and you wanted to apply for that PhD, what was your motivation for getting it done immediately? Because there is also a lot of debate within pharmacy as to whether you get it done straight away because you've done 6 years, right, of university, and here you are continuing to study. And also from a financial perspective, we have to think about the fact that you're not going to be earning as much income as a pharmacist. What were your thought processes when you made that decision?
So in France, for people who want to do like a pharmacist researcher or like pharmacist scientist, it's quite common to do the PhD right after the PharmD. And I just knew I didn't want to stay in France because I feel the PhD are not valued enough and not well recognized. So that's why I directly was looking to do a PhD abroad. And so I applied to many different kind of PhD programs, went through some interviews. In the end, I got 4 offers, and so I was able to choose, which is very nice. And I was only looking for like funded PhDs, so I could have like a salaries and kind of, for me, I consider it as a job, not as a still studying. Even if it's a mixture of studying, but also working on your PhD project and trying to deliver your project to the end, and then graduate with your PhD at the end.
Tell us a little bit about the topic of your PhD. What did you decide to do?
So initially I was interested more in cancer research because I know it's where there's a lot of funding to develop new cancer treatment. So in drug delivery formulation. So my master's research project was actually a 6 months internship in France where I was developing nanomedicine for anti-cancer treatment. And then when I applied for PhD, I applied for a wide variety of PhDs, and some of them were more cancer research and some completely different topics. And I chose my PhD more based on the feeling I had with my the PhD supervisor when I did the interview. And so my PhD ended up being in a very different field. So I worked on developing a combination product that it's one intramuscular injection for contraception and HIV prevention. So it's very different field.
Amazing. And why did you think that putting a lot of emphasis on, I guess, that kind of relationship or the feeling that you had with your supervisor was important? And I guess, was that perception of that relationship, did it come true? Like it was a benefit?
Yes. I'm so glad I picked my PhD supervisor and my PhD at the same time because I had a very good relationship with my PhD supervisor. Up to this day, we are still keeping in touch, and I'm very happy and lucky I chose this PhD. And also, the reason why I did this is I had a previous bad experience with internship supervisor who was not supporting. So that's why I wanted to make sure I have a good supervisor, because you have to stay with your supervisor for at least 3 years, and you need to make sure they are willing to support you and encourage you to finish your whole PhD. And so, for example, when I did some PhD interviews, I asked the potential PhD supervisor, what would you expect from me as a PhD student? And some potential PhD supervisor replied, hard work, including evening and weekends. And it's not the nice thing you want to hear, but the first thing you want to hear when you ask this kind of question. And fortunately, my PhD supervisor replied, as long as you do the work and you're motivated to finish the program, I would be happy to support you. And I really liked the nice atmosphere, and I had a very good feeling about it. And I'm glad it happened to materialize when I was actually doing the PhD.
Oh, that's amazing. And it's really important to, I guess, have that awareness of, what you're going into, because it's very different to studying pharmacy. You're feeling, you probably feel like you need to be so much more independent in the way that you're working. So having a support network is absolutely vital. You can definitely make friends with other students who are obviously doing their PhDs alongside you, which is great. But you also moved countries. So that's a challenge in itself. It's not like you're in your own kind of comfort zone with your family and your friends and in your own city. You're literally moving to another country and having to build all those relationships. So in order to be successful in this PhD, you need to have that rock solid supervisor to kind of guide you along the way. But it's very difficult in one interview to figure out, you got to kind of go with your gut, right?
Yes, yeah. And I heard the advice from other people is the best is to ask the current or the former lab members. You can ask them for feedback. That's now the advice I give to my mentees when they apply for their own master's or PhD program. I always ask them, contact the former lab members because they will be willing to speak out and say if it's a nice PhD supervisor or not.
Cool. That's a good idea. I like that. And you're using your own experience to guide other people along the way. Are there actually networks within like the PhD community where you can talk to each other and find out information like this? Are there any communities or groups that you can join?
There are associations for like every specific field of like pharmacy or pharmaceutical sciences. For example, I can start with pharmacy first. So there's the European Pharmaceutical Student Association, EPSA, that has a good mentoring program, and I am one of the mentors for their program, and that's why I know it's good to ask for advice from mentors like this. Then there's the International Pharmaceutical Student Federation, IPSF, and this year they started their first global IPSF research lab project, and I'm also one of the mentors there. And then otherwise in the pharmaceutical sciences field, every specific topic or subject, they have their own association. So for example, there's a control release society that's more specialized in formulation drug delivery, and they have their own network for early career or young researchers, scientists. There's also the American Association of Pharmaceutical Scientists, AAPS, that's quite known, and they also have a mentoring program within their society. And I'm sure every specific topic, specific field in pharmaceutical sciences would have their own association, and where you could ask other PhD, current PhD or former PhDs about different labs. Yes.
Yeah, no, but there's quite a few groups. That's great. I'll include all of that into the show notes and the links because I think that would be really useful for people who potentially are listening and wanting to pursue a PhD, because mentoring and getting that support is kind of a vital element to success. And clearly, the fact that you're mentoring other students means that, that support is important in the journey, and it helps you to stay motivated, and you have a place to kind of share your feedback and your thoughts and dig deep when times are really hard, and celebrate success as well when things have gone really well, because it's not an easy journey, right? Doing a PhD, it's hard work, but it's such a rewarding aspect of, I guess, becoming a pharmacist and then pursuing further qualifications. So how long did it take you, by the way?
To finish
the PhD?
The PhD. So it took me, so initially I had fundings for 3 years in the lab, but I had to extend 2 more years to finish writing up my thesis because I was very slow in writing. And as soon as I finished my PhD, like the lab part of the PhD, I actually found a job in pharmaceutical industry, and I started working full-time in industry. I only had a 1 month break, and then I started right away working in industry. And so during my evenings and weekend, I was finishing to write my thesis.
Oh.
It took me way more time than I thought it would. So I had to extend like 1.5 years. So in total, it took me 4.5 years, I think, to finish the whole PhD.
Well, that's incredible to work full time and still finish your thesis. I commend you for that. That's hard work. Now, when you look at that initial supervisor that you interviewed, hard work, evenings, weekends, that ended up being you for a short period of time.
Yeah, but it was my own will. It was not imposed by.
It wasn't an expectation from someone else, but it ended up happening anyways, but from a choice of your own. Yes. Amazing. So tell us a little bit about, I guess, what was the job that you found, and why did you decide to apply for that?
So, during my PhD, I knew I wanted to go to industry because I already did internship or placement during my PharmD abroad during the summers. So I knew I wanted to go to industry, and so I applied to many different pharmaceutical companies. And I was trying to stay within the UK, so it's easier if I have to stay close to Belfast, or if I have to go back to Belfast, then to defend my PhD thesis. And so then I got the opportunity to work as a senior analyst at Almac. It's a pharmaceutical company in Northern Ireland, and they do their own product, but they also do a contract research project. So they are a contract research organization that it means they are a contractor for other pharmaceutical companies, so big pharmaceutical companies or small, medium-sized companies. And so I was working there more in pharmaceutical analysis. So I was analyzing drug substance and drug particles. So it was good add-on to develop more skills, and I tried to learn as much as I could. And I really enjoyed my time there. I had very good supervisors also in industry, so it was always nice to have.
Is it quite daunting to apply for such a role when you don't necessarily know if you've got all the skills to do the job? And is there a training program that supports you once you're in the job as well?
So usually the pharmaceutical companies, all the big pharma, they all have the graduate program that they usually recruit MPharm of PhD graduates to train them right on the job. And so usually you do rotation in different departments before you choose your final department. I was lucky. I was in a very niche area, and I had the skills that they wanted. So it was a good fit for me and for them. And then on the job, they provide training and support. Usually during the first 6 months of any job, you will have a lot of trainings and support to make sure you follow all the rules and regulation in the pharmaceutical industry, especially when you work in a GMP environment, a good manufacturing practice environment, because there's a lot of rules to follow, and you cannot make mistake. Everything has to be recorded. So it's very important to follow all this process, and that's why they have a very long training. But it was a very good opportunity to get more skills, and then also add to my CV that I have industry experience to then the next step after.
What was the next step?
So as soon as I finished my PhD, I finished writing my PhD. As soon as I submitted the thesis for evaluation to the panel and before the final defense, I actually quit my job and I wanted to take a break after my PhD to travel and then meet international pharmacist friends. So throughout the International Pharmaceutical Student Federation, IPSF, and the European one, EPSA, I was able to meet many international pharmacists throughout the world. And I made friends with some of them through conferences or attending the World Health Assembly, for example. And so I bought a one-way ticket to go to Indonesia and meet Indonesian pharmacists there. They had the IPSF regional symposium of the Asia Pacific region in Indonesia. So I started my trip there, and then I traveled around throughout Indonesia, Australia, New Zealand. Singapore, Malaysia, Thailand, and Taiwan over 6 months.
Amazing. And I love that you incorporated pharmacy into your travels. That is a true, dedicated pharmacy professional. I love that. That's exciting. Tell us more about the travel side. What were the kind of like highlights of your trip? Where did you like the most?
I really love, like, every country have their own pros and cons, but I think Australia and New Zealand are very far away countries that you don't get to go very often. So it was kind of, I felt it was like, oh, my once in a lifetime opportunity to go there and spend enough time. So it was very enjoyable to see. I think they have very nice nature landscapes all throughout Australia, New Zealand. So I was able to travel like west side of Australia and south and east and north side of Australia. Like, I was able to see the Great Barrier Reef and go snorkeling there. And then 1 month later, I was snorkeling and I was skiing in New Zealand because it was winter there. One of my best friend is based in New Zealand, is a community pharmacist in New Zealand. And so it was very nice to go ski with him. And then it just told me at the time that, oh, I have to be there that specific week because he had another Australian pharmacist coming to visit. So we could go skiing together that week. It was the only week I knew I had to be somewhere. Otherwise, it was very freestyle planning. And I just planned my trip a bit last minute along the way and decided to meet a pharmacist friend along the way and trying to see when they were available and plan everything. And then after I went to Singapore, Malaysia, Thailand, very nice also landscapes and nice cities, good food. I like Asian food, so it was very nice. And then I moved to Taiwan. Actually, I had a working holiday visa for Taiwan. So I wanted to study Mandarin there. So I took a 3 months interns course at the university in Taipei. And then I started looking for a job at the end of 2019. Yes.
Amazing. Oh, I love this story. This is great. I'm so glad that you enjoyed traveling so much and seeing all your pharmacy friends and, yeah, exploring the world and nature. And what a different experience to doing, an intense pharmacy program and doing a PhD where you're constantly studying and, it's hard work and you're following all these rules in your job and you'd have no spontaneity. It's all work, work, work. And then you have freedom. It's like true freedom to do what you want, when you want, how you want. It feels good, right? I love that. I do. I'm a big fan of traveling myself. My dad's actually from Kenya and my mum's from Uganda. So I spent a lot of time in East Africa as a child. I lived in the US for a while, nearly a decade, in Virginia. So I studied my undergraduate degree there. And then my parents moved to California. So I lived there for a bit, and then came back home to study pharmacy here in the UK. I've lived in the UAE, so I've lived in both Dubai and Abu Dhabi and worked as a pharmacist and, got involved with the Formula One in Abu Dhabi, which was incredible to work as a pharmacist for that. And yeah, I just very much enjoy exploring the world, just like you. Even as a resident pharmacist, I convinced one of my managers to give me 3 months off so I could, go to Nepal and do the Annapurna circuit, hiking, and then travel around India with one of my best friends who's a pharmacist, and we also climbed Kilimanjaro together a couple of years earlier when we first qualified. So I totally understand for me, it's like an obsession to a need to explore different places, but also enjoy pharmacy. So I get to enjoy my profession and learn so much about what pharmacy has to offer in other countries. I really think it's broadened my kind of understanding of pharmacy on a global scale. And it's really fun. to see what kind of like how the rules are different, how counseling is different, what the culture's like, what education's like. The perception of pharmacists is completely different. When I worked in Abu Dhabi and I worked in a hospital, pharmacists aren't necessarily valued in the same way as we are in the UK. It's sort of more of what the doctor says goes, and what the pharmacist does is give out the medicines. So, the perception of our profession, is different. The rules around controlled drugs were completely different. There were points when I lived in Abu Dhabi where I was worried I might go to prison because the rules were so strict on controlled drugs. So that was quite scary and different, but exciting at the same time to be part of, a completely different culture. So I'm loving that to hear your journey of taking a break and being spontaneous and enjoying yourself. A true adventure. I love that.
And congratulations to you for like finding a job in these countries, because I know it was difficult in the UAE and Abu Dhabi to find a job there.
Yeah, it was so hard. It was really challenging, but I made it happen. I was crazy. I applied for so many things, similar to, you with the PhD. I was going to visit hospitals, going to industries and handing out my CV, going to every conference that pharmacy had to offer there and trying to make myself known. Obviously, I had to learn a little bit more Arabic because when you immerse yourself in the culture and you can speak more of the language, you are a little bit more respected in the community. And I really pushed my way even into Cleveland Clinic in Abu Dhabi, constantly going to kind of like make friends with people who work there, and then getting in with the director of pharmacy. And yeah, he gave me a job, which was amazing. And it's kind of all about networking, and it's all about that kind of communication and building friendships within the profession. It was very challenging compared to the UK, simply because in the NHS and in retail pharmacy here, there are so many jobs. I mean, when you go online, the amount of jobs that are available to you is like, picking sweets in a candy store. Like, you've got everything and anything. So it was very different to go there and feel like there was nothing, and you really had to like dig deep. It's like a needle in a haystack trying to find something that works for you. So I was very fortunate, and I found an amazing role, and what an adventure I went on in that journey. So yeah, very cool. So tell us about I guess your next steps after traveling.
So when I was in Taiwan, so I was studying Mandarin, intense Mandarin course at the university in Taipei, and I started looking for a new job. And I was trying to first stay in Taiwan, still in formulation, drug delivery, research development. I had a few interviews, and one lab they were willing to take me on, but the HR people didn't want to risk the investment on a foreigner because they were scared I would not stay long enough. So in the end, I couldn't find a job there. So I moved back to France, to my parents' house in France, and I started looking for a job more in Europe. And then the pandemic started. So I was lucky. I actually found a job, and I started a job in April 2020, working for Johnson & Johnson. And I was in pharmacovigilance and medical information. My team was based in Dublin, Ireland. And I worked remotely from my parents' house in France. And I was due to move to Dublin. But with the pandemic ongoing, they kept postponing the move dates. And in the end, I had another opportunity arise that I got a job offer to move to New York, and it's in my current company now. And it was back in I would be back in formulation and drug delivery. And so I took the job, and same, I had to wait for the US embassy in Paris to reopen so I could apply for my visa. So while waiting for this, I still continue to work for Johnson & Johnson. But I didn't like the pharmacovigilance medical information aspect too much. So I'm glad I went back to the lab and working in formulation drug delivery. And I've been in New York since September 2020.
Okay, cool. Okay, let me take 2 steps back. First, how did you find the job at Johnson & Johnson? Because I think this is a lot of people who listen to the podcast who kind of want to go down the industry route. I think if you haven't done a PhD, for example, and you finished your pharmacy degree and then you want to go into industry, there is a perception in the pharmacy society or the pharmacy profession in the UK that there's such a tiny percentage of pharmacists who can then transition from university directly into an industry role. Where do you look for these types of jobs? Where do you find them?
So first, I think for like UK-based pharmacist or a European-based pharmacist, the ESAS is the entry graduate program. All the big pharmaceutical companies, they have this kind of fresh graduate program where you do rotation in different departments before you choose your final department. So I know most of my industrial pharmacist friends, that's what they did. Otherwise, if you have a PhD, you already have a niche. So and you have usually technical skills. So it's more looking for the jobs through LinkedIn or all the job search websites. And then it's all about networking, like especially in industry, in the pharmaceutical industry, you need to have a very good LinkedIn profile and make sure it's up to date, and you write down all your skills, your experience, and this is actually how I was contacted by a headhunter to work at Johnson & Johnson. So I didn't even apply for the job. They came to look for me because they found me on LinkedIn and say, would you be interested to apply for this job? And I did. And I was lucky also because it was during the pandemic. So
Amazing. I didn't realize LinkedIn is amazing, and there is a massive network of pharmacists and pharmaceutical companies, hospitals. I mean, everyone's on there, and it's becoming a major place to actually find jobs, right? Even when I worked in the UAE, I used LinkedIn to find roles and network with people, make friends, find out when conferences were. So you're right, like networking is a huge kind of a valuable aspect of finding the right jobs for you. And it is, yes, you're right, keeping your kind of profile active and up to date is really important. So if you're headhunted, people can kind of know more about you simply by looking at that profile. Do you think that all the choices that you've made to date have led to that fact where you're getting headhunted, or do you think that it's chance that people find you?
Could be a mix of both, but yeah, definitely. I'm glad I had my LinkedIn was kind of up to date at the time, so it was. I think it's good that I was ready to be headhunted, I think, and that's why I got this opportunity, and I actually advise all my mentees to. The first thing I always advise them is get your LinkedIn ready. So by the time you graduate, you should have at least 500 plus connection, and to show that you're really ready to work and to be on the job market, and especially in the pharmaceutical industry. People want to make sure you're connected and you know your field, or you have good connection in the pharmaceutical industry.
That's really interesting, because when you look at hospital pharmacy or retail pharmacy, I mean, I've worked in hospital for over a decade now, and I genuinely don't look at people's LinkedIn profiles as part of the recruitment process. You literally are looking at their application and what they put on the application, and you don't think laterally like, oh, let me go check out what's happening on their LinkedIn profile and see what it's like, because it's just not common process. So it's interesting that with industry, that is something that's really, valuable and useful for people to know. So thanks for sharing that. So the second question I had was, what was it about pharmacovigilance and kind of medical information that you didn't like so much?
Um, so the part that I didn't like about pharmacovigilance and medical information is it was too repetitive for me. And I already did hospital pharmacy, like placement in pharmacovigilance in France. So I already knew what to expect. Um, I took the job because at the time it was a pandemic, so I was glad to get any job. And it was still a very good experience to work for Johnson and Johnson. And I'm so glad I still got the experience. So yeah, the only part I didn't like is just too repetitive to me. And yes, and I at the time I saw there was no opportunity to progress and to learn more skills or like to change department easily. So that's why then I move on to another opportunity in the US.
And maybe were you missing the lab?
Yes, also a bit. Yeah, of course. Yeah.
Amazing. So, yeah, tell us about where you're working now, your kind of motivation behind moving to the US, and yeah, what you're getting up to.
So when I started looking for jobs again in like early 2020 and during the pandemic, so I applied mostly in Europe first, and I also started applying in the US because I know there are very good research and development labs in the pharmaceutical industry in the US. And I just decided to follow this path. And so currently now I'm working at the Population Council, which is a very unique environment because it's a non-profit NGO, and we work similarly to a small pharmaceutical industry where we have research and development labs, and we worked on based on public and private fundings. We develop pharmaceutical drug products, and so currently, so my nonprofit NGO is specialized in sexual and reproductive health products. So we mostly focus on developing contraceptive, anti-HIV, anti-STI products, or a combination of all of these. And it's similar to what I did during my PhD in terms of the field. So it was a good continuation, and I'm really enjoying the aspect that it's very diverse and every day is very different. And I'm still learning every day new things about pharmaceutical engineering or pharmaceutical analysis, how to plan long-term stability protocol for drug products, or how to develop a new drug formulation on, for example, now I'm working on a vaginal ring product, which is very different from an injectable, for example. So it's very interesting to change the dosage form and developing new skills by learning all this.
And when you say there's a lot of variety in the role, can you tell us a little bit more about, yeah, what does your day-to-day look like in terms of variety?
So it's very hard to say because I think every day is different. But it's a mixture of preparing experiment in the lab, then just making sure sourcing all the excipient or the drug powder you need, and planning all your lab experiments. And then in my lab we have a team of 3 technicians and 1 quality assurance quality control specialist and my lab manager, and we all work together to develop this product, and then we do some stability testing on products that are currently in clinical trials. Then we also do manufacturing of vaginal rings for clinical trials, for example. And currently, I'm doing the qualification of a new injection molding machine. It's a new machine to manufacture vaginal rings. And so every day is very different, and I'm still learning new things every day.
Very a big variety in the skills as well that you need. What do you think are kind of like your the main skills that you use in this role that are potentially different to what a hospital pharmacist or a community pharmacist would need?
I would say it's more the technical skills that are required. You need to have a very good, solid chemistry knowledge or analytical chemistry, then pharmaceutical engineering. I think that's the most important aspect that we need compared to hospital or community pharmacy. Otherwise, I think there are some similarities. For example, even if I don't have direct patient, I feel that I have to collaborate with different people from different departments, and this is kind of similar as speaking to different patient. I feel so. You have to be very good at communicating with a wide range of different people.
Amazing. And how do you like New York City?
I really love New York City. I think it's very exciting and interesting city to be in, and there's always new things happening. And it was even more interesting to move here during the pandemic because I moved here in September 2020, and the city was very empty at the time. There were no tourists anymore because there was a lot of like ban of a visa ban and like tourist ban for like European tourists could come to the US. So it's very quiet and very empty, and it was nice also to see the city coming back to life. And now it's back in full motion, I think, and it's full of tourists again, and all the prices went back up also. So it's very crazy and interesting city.
Yeah, no, I've been there a few times and I do love it. I'm not sure I could live there though. It's quite intense. I mean, here in the UK, I'm living in Hertfordshire and it's really countryside. There's cows and sheep and quiet lanes and a lot of greenery. Very different to New York. But I do like coming there for holidays for sure. And I do love the seasons. There's so much to do there. And you obviously have greenery there. It's just slightly different to obviously what the UK has to offer. But the US in general is really a fun place to live. There's so much going on. The weather is really good. And when you're in New York, you're so close to other places. You can travel up to Canada for long weekends if you really wanted to. You've got, skiing in kind of the north side of the state if you really like that kind of adventure. So yeah, there's a lot to offer. So it's nice to hear that you're again on your next country on your list of places to live. I love it. I mean, we're here because obviously we've connected through the fact that I'm doing a podcast series with FIP and the Early Careers Pharmaceutical Group. So tell us how you got involved with that and what your role is at the moment.
So I think it's similar to Xavier and Amanda. I actually knew Xavier and Amanda earlier through the International Pharmaceutical Student Federation, IPSF. And most of us, we all transited from the student level to the early career pharmacist level with FIP. And I was already volunteering a lot with IPSF and EPSA. And then I just wanted to stay active and keep networking with early career pharmacists. So I joined the early career pharmaceutical group or young pharmaceutical group in the past. And I was first a liaison for the drug delivery and manufacturing special interest group, SIG, for the last 2 years. And was in this role, I was able to network with professors and scientists working in drug delivery and manufacturing. And we submitted a session proposal for FIP World Congress and the Pharmaceutical World Congress. There was one in 2020, and it was remote in Canada. And then last year I applied to become the chairperson of Liaison for 2023, and it's my current role now. And it's been a very exciting and interesting journey so far.
You do a lot. You've got mentoring, you've got your job, which is definitely going to be sort of hard work, I think. It's the type of role where you're using a lot of brain power all day long, it feels. So it's quite intense in terms of what you do on a day-to-day basis. Plus, you're getting involved on an international or a global scale in different areas. How do you find time to do all of this?
It requires a lot of planning and management. But the most important is learning to say no. Sometimes you cannot say yes to everything. So I still often have to say no to some opportunities, but I'm just trying to plan everything so I'm able to do what I want and what I like.
Amazing. Any new adventures coming up that we should know about?
So as I like traveling, I'm always planning for my next trip, and the next big trip is going to attend the FIP World Congress in Brisbane, Australia. So it's at the end of September, and it would be very interesting to meet Safie, Amanda, Gonzalo, and Ella, the other ECPG steering committee members, and also other early career pharmacists, and network with all the pharmacists from like hospital pharmacy, community pharmacy, and pharmaceutical scientists, and also industry pharmacists.
Yeah, that's going to be so much fun for sure. And I noticed already on the FIP website that next year it's in South Africa. How cool.
Yes.
I'm unable to make it this year, which is such a shame. Our hospital is going live with a new electronic prescribing program in the beginning of October. So kind of the build up to that there's a lot of work going on at the moment, and they're trying to encourage us not to take too much time off in the month beforehand. And because I've recently returned from maternity leave, and I've taken quite a lot of leave up until now because obviously I still have a really young baby at home. So I've been kind of taking annual leave to spend time with him, as well as, do my job. And I obviously work at the hospital and the university. Plus I've got the podcast, which is a lot of work now, and work that I love and I enjoy. So I haven't been able to take the time off to join the FIP Congress this year, but I've got my eyes on 2024, and I've never been to South Africa, and that would be absolutely amazing. So maybe our paths will cross.
Yes.
In another space. And I'm so happy that we had the opportunity to get this recording done, and I've learned so much about your career journey, all the hard work you've been doing. I love that we have adventure as something in common, and traveling. That's a wonderful part of enjoying being a pharmacist, as well as traveling the world. So it's an absolute pleasure to get to know you, and thank you again for making the time for me tonight.
Thank you very much for having me.
Absolutely.
And best of luck to all your future podcast recording, and thank you for actually recording, because it's very nice and interesting to see you're kind of advocating for pharmacy and pharmaceutical scientists. So it's very nice.
I'm on a mission. A mission, and I'm trying my best. I was very excited because Safie's episode was 101. And it was a big celebration to get to 100. I mean, it's been, 3 years of really kind of hard work, and it's a passion project outside of a full-time job and life as a parent. I got pregnant during that time. I've had a baby. I was still doing the podcast with a newborn in my arms. It's been, a lot of slog, but it makes me realize how much I love my profession. And I truly believe that we don't advocate for a pharmacy enough. And I think this platform has been a great place to showcase what we've been getting up to and share that with the world. So, it's been a pleasure to get to know you, and let's definitely keep this friendship going.